Progressivism has shaped the identity of the United States and many other Western nations for well over a century now, influencing our notions of charity by making it a matter of compulsion rather than a matter led by the dictates of the heart, to education, moving it from a tool to refine the moral taste and understanding of the pupil and align them with the world, to being a tool of schooling them and making them align with the society and the demands of those in the society. Progressivism influence is felt everywhere. But amongst every single problem progressivism has foisted upon us as Americans and as Westerners, there is one single error from which all of those problems and all of those implications stem from that does not get talked about as much as it should be. So, my friends, in this video, I will go over this single fatal error of progressivism. I will explain how it has taken root in our society, how it has convinced so many people, and how it manifests today, and I will give us a blueprint to effectively vanquish it from our society by embracing a strong philosophy of civic formation rooted in first principles and a sound understanding of the relationship between politics and society. But my friends, before we do that, I hope all of you are doing well. I am Christian Watson. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoy political and social commentary from a philosophical bent, then I must implore you, please like, share, comment, subscribe. Do whatever you can, my friends, to ensure that our message is successful. My friends, this is a civic conservative project. If you wish to rescue the American experiment from the throes of cultural coercion and also to forcibly assert the principles of the Enlightenment and the principles of Americanism that we were founded upon in the public discourse against our enemies, then I would encourage you again to support this project. I would encourage you to like, share, comment, subscribe, join the Discord if you wish, donate if you wish. All of it helps me continue to bring more enlightening commentary to you. Thank you guys so much for being here. Now please enjoy the video. So, before I explain this fatal error, I think it's going to be very instructive for me to point out some of the errors the critics of progressivism, however well-intentioned they may be, and many of them are certainly well-intentioned, have made in their analysis of progressivism. There are three cardinal criticisms of progressivism that I think are ostensibly plausible, but when they are put against scrutiny, you see their flaws, and these criticisms, that these erroneous criticisms being made so often has opened up the door for the progressive establishment and progressive activists to essentially continue getting steam, while many right-leaning causes are deemed to be evil, alien to good sense, and somehow bad. So the first error many critics of progressivism make in criticizing progressivism is in asserting that it is a utopian philosophy. Many critics will say that progressivism is utopian, it's unrealistic, and therefore we should be against it because it does not work, and if it does work, it'll have devastating consequences. While there is a kernel of truth to this, progressivism certainly does treat society and certainly does treat politics as an endeavor that seems to be utopian, that seems to be far-flung. It's actually not resonant with the actual project of progressivism, because progressivism, far from being utopian in how it handles issues, actually focuses on the problems of society much more than the merits and the victories of human beings in general. And by focusing so much on the problems of society, progressivism literally invents a reason for its own existence. You may hear progressives talk about so many different things, like, for example, a lack of a universal healthcare system, about poverty, about so many different things, about the rich not paying their fair share, the rich being greedy. All of these are results of phenomena that are not inherently political, but are made political by the progressive to again legitimize the continued existence of their ideology in the public square. A utopian ideology focuses entirely on the end goal, and any means and any interplay between the beginning and the end goal are just incidental. But for progressivism, the problem is the focus, which is why you will always see people say that progress needs to continue to happen. We need to continue to make progress because it never ends. There's always going to be a problem for someone to try to fix. Someone may also say that progressivism is egalitarian, that it views everyone with this kind of unrealistic lens that poses a status that is not realistic. And while I wish this was true, and while this does seem to be true in how progressives talk about equality and inequality, especially income inequality, And how they treat distinction, it is evidently not true. For example, progressives draw a antagonistic distinction between the common person and big business, for example, between the rich and the poor. And in drawing these distinctions, they attach moral qualities to people on the basis of which group they're in, as opposed to on the basis of their character and their merits. And by doing that, induces a kind of villainy into the status of some people, and then mobilizes the rest of society against those people. This is why you always hear wealthy people getting attacked and getting villainized by progressives. This is why eat the rich is a thing. So progressivism, far from being egalitarian, is actually one of the most hierarchical and factional political ideologies in modern history, in the modern history of the West. There are others that are more extreme, but it is one of the most unapologetic about it, because it is factional in pursuit of some kind of good in its idea. One last error that many people make is believing that progressivism is inherently socialistic. Now, it is true, progressivism has elements of socialism inherent within its measure. For example, the entire idea of the socialization of property, which a prominent progressive economist, Richard T. Ely, came up with in the progressive era, which has shaped how many progressives seek to deal with private property and limit its autonomy in society, which says that your property should still be yours, but only yours as long as it serves a common good, which is the stem of the entire idea that businesses have corporate social responsibility, so on and so forth, that the rich have a responsibility to give back their wealth, even if it's by taxation, even if it's by forcible taking. And so the progressive, while incorporating socialistic elements within their philosophy, still maintain that society should exist in a form where the government is sort of the guide of the people in society, rather than instead the holistic force to guide society to a proper state. And they do this by rejecting more explicit forms of socialism. So while it is socialistic in how it deals with certain things, it is not purely socialism. So, having gotten all of this out of the way, I think the fatal error of progressivism, which all of its numerous problems flow from, has to do with its view of political order posed against the question of the human, posed against the question of human nature. Hakeem Jeffries, who is a very prominent Democrat, actually kind of encapsulated what I think the fatal error of progressivism is in a recent marathon speech he gave on the House floor. The details of the speech are actually rather irrelevant, but here is Hakeem Jeffries speaking of what he believes the purpose of politics is in American society.
Politics, at the end of the day, is about the management of public money. That's why we need everyday Americans to participate in your democracy.
In case you missed it, Jeffrey says that politics is about the management of public money. So for him, politics is primarily about ensuring that the public's resources are distributed to its proper places, and of course its proper place is decided by a general sense of the public, what the public is, which is then filtered through a political lens. So ultimately, the progressive is the one who is deciding what the public actually wants, filtering it through their biased lens, and that is what so politics is a matter of management, which is a very interesting omission, because it actually signifies a view of politics that says that political order is actually a tool of formation, that it should form hearts, it should form character of men, rather than simply maintaining what all men have in common. This is what the entire idea of social justice suggests. Social justice suggests that resources and material things are actually an important part of the pursuit of justice, and that there has to be some kind of impartial party to distribute those things to ensure a kind of equity, therefore making politics a tool of moral formation, a tool of character formation, rather than a tool that is simply worried about guarding what all men indeed have in common. And from this principle, they tie politics to efficiency. And they also tie politics to utilitarianism. What benefits the most people at any given amount of time? And the entire moral universe of progressivism flows downstream of efficiency and utilitarianism. This is exactly why you see, for example, such a prominent emphasis on the welfare state amongst progressives. This is exactly why you see a prominent emphasis on taxation as a matter of redistribution to, quote unquote, help the poor. This is exactly why you see such a big emphasis on corporate social responsibility. This is exactly why you see such a big emphasis on universal health care. They don't posit these things merely as policies. They posit these things primarily and most importantly as moral goals to be achieved by those who seek to help those who are somehow disadvantaged versus those who have the most resources. But the problem is, justice, truly understood, is not about distributing resources. Justice, truly understood, as I have repeated several times in this video, is about, number one, it's actually about a few things. Number one, recognizing the eternal truths that flow from man, and then positing a principle that is sort of a bulwark between those eternal truths and how those truths are interacted with by A, political authority, and B, everyone within the society as well who could get political power or who simply exist in the private society. That means to understand justice, you must also understand what makes conduct proper. To understand what makes conduct proper, you must also understand what first principles are and how to decide which first principles you're going to follow. To understand what first principles you're going to follow, you must also understand exactly how we as social animals, how man as a social animal operates in a way that preserves the society he exists in. And you must also understand why man wants society in the first place. He wants society because he has a social instinct called sociability, which the great Grotius, who is, I think, one of the forefathers of the American experiment downstream, his ideas came to our founders in a quite profound way, understood as our drive and desire to cooperate with others to ensure the necessities of life. Society is not built to coddle man, to comfort man. Society is built to complement man in the pursuit of his own endeavors, guarded by a bulwark of rights and maintained by a kind of good governance. Good governance simply means that there's going to be an agent there to maintain the relationship, then mediate disputes. A proper understanding of justice is going to be universal to who we are as people. It's not going to be specific to what our position in a particular society is. It's not going to be specific to our status. Progressivism binds justice to status and then makes moral claims from that end, which then means there is no, by the progressive standard, single strong foundation for justice. Justice is an ever-changing standard that can justify almost any single thing in its measure because there is no single metric, there's no consistent metric by which to measure it. This is philosophical and moral chaos. And that is what the Progressive Project, in the name of the good, so to speak, the capital G good, has been foisting upon the West for so long. That is why the Progressive Project has been able to justify the restriction of our pursuit of truth through mediocre terms like hate speech. That is why the Progressive Project has been able to justify the restriction of our ability to gain simply by the fact, the natural fact, that others have less, which is actually rather an indication of the uniqueness of our humanity, that we can even get anything in the first place, compared to the rest of the beasts of the world, rather than an indictment upon our society. This is why the Progressive Project is able to ostensibly drum up a sense of injustice in so many people, because its idea of justice is so flexible, it's so invertebrate. It always changes. A utilitarian form of justice, my friends, does not consider who we are. It does not consider the subject. Man is the subject of justice. It does not consider the subject. It instead considers the goal. And the goal will depend on whoever is in power. Woodrow Wilson said in one of his essays that the Constitution of 1776 was flawed because it, amongst many other things, had a Newtonian view of morality. By a Newtonian view of morality, Woodrow Wilson actually meant that the Constitution was based too much on what he called rigid ideas and principles that did not reflect the society at hand. He instead said we should have a Darwinian view of society, or he called it an organic view of society, where laws reflect the realities of a particular time and a particular day, and they continue to evolve with those realities in those times. But if you have a society where your laws are on such a shaky and shifting foundation of sand that they can be affixed to nothing more than what the moment calls to, you have a society ruled by passion where the masses become the sort of driving motive of political order, and political order itself has no bedrock upon which to stand. That means one day the political order might be generous, and the next day the political order might be vicious. Masses that are moved by passions are going to be overrun with the vicious principles. The vicious principles are the principles that make man more like beast than man. They're opposed to social principles, whereas beneficence and reason are social principles, vengeance and anger are vicious principles. Progressivism literally opens the gate for the vicious principles to move into the society, to move into the masses, and by doing that, affect policy, where we are all at risk. Justice, my friends, must be based on something concrete, stable, and measurable, something that does not change from time to time. And the fatal error of the progressive is in thinking that simply by moving around some parts here and there, politics can make us better as people. It can make a society better, without realizing that society is not made better by the sword. Society is made better, again, by conscience being rightly formed and by rightful conduct being at the center of the minds of everyone within the society, which does not come from the sword. It comes from a rather full moral imagination and moral sense. The conservative says no, there are things that are eternal, there are things that are constant, and these things, my friends, these things are the things that we should use as our guide for the future. And that, my friends, is what we're going to have to do in America if we are to reclaim our heritage, if we are to reclaim the condition of our nation from the forces that have allowed the kind of utilitarian nonsense that has governed us for over a century to overtake us. And that is why, my friends, I encourage all of you to join my new project, the Pensive cohort, where I will be recruiting a cohort of thinkers, especially if you're younger, that will reassert the principles of the Enlightenment and reassert once again the principles of the American experiment into the current discourse. And we will do so with love, and we will do so with rigor, and we will do so with passion for what is right, and with avoidance to what is incorrect, even if it sounds good. My friends, like, share, comment, subscribe, do whatever you can. Just be sure to donate if you want to. Be sure to comment your thoughts. Tell me what you think. My friends, study history, study philosophy, and more than please stay pensive. Bye, guys.